Hi, thanks for stopping by. Today I'm going to be talking about the January-February 2020 issue of Analog Science Fiction and Fact magazine. Now, there's a lot to talk about with this issue, so let's get right to it. First of all, you'll notice from the cover that they are celebrating their 90th year of publication this year. So they're doing all sorts of fun things to sort of celebrate this anniversary. One of the first things is towards the end of last year, first part of this year, they had a giveaway on Facebook where they gave away these shiny 90th anniversary pins. You can see I'm wearing one here. Here's a close-up view. I was lucky enough to be one of the winners of that, so that's pretty neat. Um, Also, because and to celebrate their 90th year, they're going to feature every issue this year is going to feature a what they're calling retrospective reprint, where they're going to take a story that sums up, they felt, a particular decade, and reprint it in that given month's issue. The reprint for the January-February issue is a story from the 1990s, and I will definitely be talking about that a little bit later on because it was just phenomenal. But let's talk about some of the other stories very briefly before we get to that one. Hive by Jay Werkheiser was a fun story. It's kind of an interesting twist on first contact idea. Humans land on an alien world and find it populated by what they see as unintelligent insect-like creatures, just swarms of them. Now, the story flips back and forth between the human perspective and that of the aliens, which I should say the insects, because the humans are the aliens on that particular planet. The native insect population, which actually communicate via pheromones, and it's kind of interesting seeing both sides sort of puzzling out the humans trying to puzzle out if there is in fact any intelligent life on this planet because it's not of a form that they recognize, and the natives trying to puzzle out why these new bodies aren't secreting pheromones of their own. That was pretty fun. It was very well written. The Great Gray Mossy is another Harry Turtledove story. It was a pretty fun reimagining of Moby Dick that was set in the same world as his earlier dino story, Bone Hunters, from last year, from 2019. There was a story and a science fact article by Eric Choi. The story is The Greatest Day, and the science fact article is related to it. Greatest Day is an alternate take on the 2003 Columbia shuttle disaster, based on findings in the report of the Columbia Accident Investigation Board. And then the science fact article talks about what the board found, what its conclusions were, what could have possibly been done to avert the catastrophe, and those sort of ideas served as the springboard for the story The Greatest Day, which dealt with that self-same accident, but in this version, they actually managed to save some of the astronauts. Not all of them, sadly, but they managed to save some of them. Just the idea of taking this factual report and its suggestions on what could have been done and turning a story out of that really kind of stuck with me. I thought that was very interesting. Guns Don't Kill by Richard A. Lovett was a short story, a series of situations involving guns with smart AI. One gun stops a hunter trying to kill a deer out of season, another one reports a would-be poacher, and then there were two that were involved on either side of a police standoff. That was an entertaining story with a kind of what some might see as sort of a somewhat menacing conclusion, because the two of the AIs of the guns that were involved in that police standoff, say basically, look, they can't control themselves, so we will control ourselves for them. As I said, some people might find that kind of a menacing conclusion. I didn't particularly. Let's see, find some other ones. Wheel of Echoes by Sean McMullen. This was so much fun. This was a great short story. A Shakespearean student, together with a professor and expert scholar of Shakespeare, listened to an actual recording of Shakespeare himself reading lines from Hamlet. And what they hear promises to upend Shakespearean studies completely. This was a really fun story with some really great characters. The naive but enthusiastic student, the pompous I know everything professor who stands to have his career ruined should this discovery be made public, and the engineer who made the discovery, who has a personal connection to the professor that fuels his delight in shredding that professor's life's work. As a sometime actor and somewhat Shakespearean scholar myself, I really enjoyed this story. I thought it was loads of fun. Welcome to the New You by Douglas DeLuzin was another great short story that was sort of an introductory pamphlet type email from a do-it-yourself CRISPR kit. Now, Doug wrote a science fact article last year about the dangers of gene editing technology, which was actually one of the ones that I recommended as an award for their ANLab for one of their best science fact articles. Excuse me. And this story kind of reads like a list of all the things that he warned about. People being able to selectively edit whatever kind of genes they wanted, and presented as I said, sort of an introductory pamphlet from the company that sells it, saying, these are all the advantages that you can have from editing your own genome. Give yourself superpowers. Let yourself live for hundreds of years. That kind of thing. A couple other short stories that I thought are just worth a brief mention that were a lot of fun. Hubble Rising by C. Stuart Hardwick and Around the World in 96 Hours. A couple more short stories by Wendy Nichols, excuse me. A couple more short stories that I really, really enjoyed reading and would encourage, if you get a chance to get your hands on this magazine, to read those as well. Now, pardon me. On to the retrospective from this issue. It was a repeat. As I said, the retrospectives are reprints from earlier in the mag's history. Each one is supposed to be like representative of the decade in which it was published. This one comes actually from 1999, and it's The Astronaut from Wyoming by Adam Troy Castro and Jerry Oltien. Now, if you have been following my videos, you know that I'm always a big fan of Adam Troy Castro's works. I particularly enjoy the Draken novellas, but many of his other novelettes, short stories, I always enjoy reading his stuff. This particular story, The Astronaut from Wyoming, frankly, it's a fantastic way to introduce the retrospective concept that they're going with this year. It's a very moving story of a perfectly normal boy who was born in Wyoming, 100% human, absolutely, completely normal, who just happens to look like an alien. Big head, round black eyes, pointy chin, gray skin, through no fault of his own, just not even a fault of his parents. There was actually a syndrome for it that they identify. He says, this is what this poor kid has. And it's unfortunate, but he looks like an alien. And the story, talks about how he is perceived by an imperfect world. It's a very touching story, at times very, very funny, and also fairly thought-provoking. The way he was born in this small town in Wyoming, the astronaut is from Wyoming, and it's a very close-knit community who kind of rallies around him to protect him. So he grows up realizing that he looks different, but not letting it affect him because no one else really let it affect them, all of his friends and neighbors. So when he goes out into the real world, people react to him differently, and he doesn't really understand why. He said, what? I'm just a normal person, just like you. I just happen to look a little bit different. They, the two authors, Jerry Oltien and Adam Troy Castro, shared a little postscript where they each talk about the writing of that story. And in his, Stanley Schmidt does an editorial kind of introducing it as well. And they talk about how it was sort of its time because it was written in the late 90s, but it's still very relevant today with the idea of people being afraid of things that they don't understand and looking for answers and solutions in not necessarily the most scientific or knowledgeable of places. It's a fantastic novella. I absolutely encourage you to check it out. The story won the Analytical Laboratory of the year that it appeared in, 1999, walked away with top novella honors. And quite frankly, I can see it walking away with top novella honors in 2020 as well. It was just that good. Okay, and again, the rest of the stories and poems and articles in there that were also a lot of fun to read. I could talk about all of them, but we'd be here much longer than I originally intend to. So do yourself a favor, if you haven't had a chance to check it out, pick up the January-February analog And check back here in another month. I'll talk about the March April Asimovs and the March April Analog. I can't wait to see the retrospective story that Analog has in store for its next issue. So, yeah, so I will see you next time. Take care.